Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Board and Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you on the Tuesday after the Conference Championship games in the 2025 NFL playoffs. However, that will not be the main topic of today because we have had some breaking news over the past couple of hours. In fact, literally about 2 hours since since it's come out, as we record. That needs to be dived into straight away. And we will be diving into that as soon as I do the introduction and the admin, which is as simple as saying thank you very much for joining. So don't forget, you are listening to this on YouTube. Feel free to also give a like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, leave comments, do everything that you need to do to help this podcast continue to grow. Everything very much appreciated. So feel free to do that. Don't forget to also follow us on our other socials. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and we are at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So give us a follow there. And if you are returning, then as always, thank you very much for your continued support. Right, that's the intro out of the way. And this show was already pretty jam-packed as it was. In fact, as I turned to my notes, I sort of broke it down into not one story to begin with, 2 seconds, then the roundup, then the off-field stuff. I've broken this down into like 5 different sections already. And then the news coming out earlier that, again, needs to be talked about straight away. And that is the news that Bill Belichick has reportedly been snubbed from being a first-time Hall of Famer. Now, there are some conflicting reports coming out about this. The main one seems to be that Bill Polian, who was a former figure of the Buffalo Bills, obviously AFC East rivals with the Patriots, and also had his ties to the Indianapolis Colts. And we remember the Patriots-Colts rivalries from the 2000s may have played a part in this, but according to reports, this is all that, it is reports. No. We'll get into why I can say it's only reports a little bit later. But Bill Polian, according to reports, basically saying that he led, this is coming from ESPN, he was a vocal figure in the Hall of Fame deliberations involving Bill Belichick. And basically he said that because of Spygate and Deflategate, that he should be made to wait a year as, punishment for those things, even though they have been punished with draft picks and fines and whatever, Brady suspension and everything like that. Moving on. But the report is that he basically sabotaged, maybe as an act of revenge, don't know, whatever. But as I say, these are just reports because according to Matt Verdami, who is an NFL senior writer for Sports Illustrated, he basically claims that he spoke on the phone with Bill Polian and asked whether he was an influence in Bill Belichick being snubbed by the Hall of Fame. His quote, and this is what Matt Verdami has tweeted out: "That's totally and categorically untrue. I voted for him." Now, it is possible the two things could be true at the same time. As someone pointed out in a comment underneath, which kind of does make sense, he may have, saved his own skin by legitimately voting for him to cover his tracks, just in case this comes out in the future, whilst also convincing other writers to say, hey, don't vote for him, but then secretly voting for him. So if it does come out in the future, it still says, Bill Polian voted for Bill Belichick, and he can just quash any rumors that it was him involved. Very, very easily, quite possibly, this is all speculation at this point. But that's the quote unquote facts of the matter. My take on this is that it's absolutely disgraceful, shameful, on whatever. However, the Hall of Fame voters came to this conclusion to make Bill Belichick wait here as a punishment for, again, things he's already been punished for, is, as I said, disgraceful, shameful, and, as I tweeted out, basically means the Hall of Fame loses the vast majority of its credibility moving forward. Because how can Bill Belichick, 8-time Super Bowl winner as a defensive coordinator with the Giants and then with the Patriots during that dynasty, number 2 when it comes to all-time wins in the NFL, that's regular season and postseason, behind Don Shula, there could be no argument that he is among the greatest coaches of all time. Now, I understand that with the whole Tom Brady situation and the fact that Tom Brady had success away from the Patriots and Bill Belichick without Brady was not really that much in Cleveland, and we saw how it ended in New England, and we see how it's going in Carolina. Whatever, but you can't deny that he's at least in the discussion for greatest coach of all time. But to not be a first ballot Hall of Famer is, as I say, just brings everything into dispute. And as Ryan Clark said, if we're doing this as a punishment for Spygate and Deflategate, does that not punish Tom Brady as well? Because they're all intertwined in it, especially Deflategate. He served a suspension, but is this going to be something we look back on and say, hey, if you held Bill Belichick out for a year because of Spygate, should you hold Tom Brady out for a year because of Deflategate? It causes far more problems and far more discussions than it needed to. This shouldn't even have been a debate. I've seen many programs about how the Hall of Fame selection process is done and how it's whittled down. And then there's a chance for one writer, usually from the local press from the city where the player, played the most and is most recognizable. And I've heard stories about, I think the most famous one is Brett Favre, where it comes around to, okay, now to make the case for Brett Favre to be in the Hall of Fame, here's whoever the writer is. And he literally stands up and says, ladies and gentlemen, Brett Favre, and sits down and ends the debate. That should have been it with Bill Belichick. Like it will be the case with Tom Brady. I'm pretty sure, I can't remember the detail, but pretty sure it must have been the case for Peyton Manning and all that sort of stuff. It should have been the same with Bill Belichick. There's no need for a discussion. So why is it? It's just absolutely mind-boggling that the NFL or the Pro Football Hall of Fame voters, through whatever means it was, if there was some backhanded dealings or if Bill Polian had a say in it or if he didn't, through one way or the other, to make Bill Belichick wait a year is just wrong. Just flat out wrong. And I have, because I remember making this point about, I believe it was Ichiro, when he got snubbed by the Baseball Hall of Fame by one vote, and he wasn't unanimously put in. And I remember a lot of the backlash was, the Baseball Hall of Fame is quite, traditional. No one should get in unanimously, but then I think it was Mariano Rivera was the first one that did, and it's not been the same, even though players deserve to go in unanimously, but they just won't do it. And I said at the time, I kind of agreed with the idea of having that one person having his credentials taken away, name, shame, and make sure they don't vote again. I'm in the same boat with this, honestly. Name those 10 people he had to get 40 votes, 40 out of the 50 votes to get in. So maybe it was 11, maybe it was more, but whatever. Name the people who did not let him in, shame them, and take their credentials away. Because it is just absolutely wrong that Bill Belichick does not get into the Hall of Fame in his first year. Just disgraceful. Right, and with that we move on to number two, section number two rather, and this is going to be a bit Buffalo Bills heavy for a couple of reasons. Two different topics, but I may as well combine them into one. I will get onto the fact they've appointed their head coach later, but before that, they went through a few interesting. They had a few headlines come out around their head coaching says. The first one being the introduction of Philip Rivers into the coaching carousel because they brought him in for an interview, and it raised a lot of eyebrows at the time. And I'll admit it raised my eyebrow as well, because how can someone go from being a player directly to then having to go directly to being a head coach? There's usually at least some steps between the two of them. But then someone did point out that very recently he was effectively an offensive coordinator for the best part of a decade plus, because he had the presence, the credibility, the skill set behind him to basically run the offense as he wanted. He didn't necessarily go to the offensive coordinator for help. It was probably the other way around, where the offensive coordinator said, "Right, how do you want this run? Because you have a certain skill set and credibility. Let's lean it to you." A bit like, I can't remember who it was, who would have been at the time, but Peyton Manning, in his when he went to the Broncos, was effectively offensive coordinator and said, "No, this is how I run things. We're going to do it. We're going to do it this way." And I think Tony Dungy as well said there were times where he just said, "Peyton Manning, the offense is yours. I'll get back to you on that." So I do understand there is some level of that to it, and when you also factor in his coaching career with it's high school level, I get it, but he has had that that leadership ability about him to be able to go and coach a team, as it were. So it did bring up my mind, should we be as dismissive as I was of players making that jump in the future? where if they're very recently retired, obviously Philip Rivers was retired a couple of years ago before this brief stint, but if they have recently retired, should we be dismissive of them coming straight into coaching? Who retired this year? For the sake of argument, if Travis Kelce retires, say, I don't think he will go down that road, but let's say it. Travis Kelce, if he wanted to go directly into coaching, not necessarily head coaching, but be an offensive coordinator. Again, he was a large part of the Kansas City offense for years. You don't think he has the mind to be able to scheme up something, maybe, or no, at least be able to hint to someone, hey, I'm experienced, I know what I'm doing. Let me take control of the offense. I can make it work. Again, someone of his credibility and his standing, I think, could make it work. Now, a third string cornerback wanting to be defensive coordinator, maybe you may, push back on that a bit more. But it was a case I've always made. Like, back in my younger, I always said, like, if Ray Lewis wanted to say, I'm getting into coaching and I want to be a defense coordinator, someone like Ray Lewis, I wouldn't interview them. I would take the risk and to say, okay, Ray Lewis, it's yours. Come in, you're interested, okay, the job's yours. Someone like that with that mind, I think, and that leadership ability we saw it is like, in those certain situations, just give them the job. So I think it's a possibility. Again, how many times we're going to see this moving forward, I don't know. But when it does come up, don't be too dismissive and don't laugh at it straight away. Would just be my takeaway from it. The other news of the Buffalo Bills generated, and I don't know if it's really news, but again, something I feel should be touched on. And it's the claims that Josh Allen, this came from Diana Rossini of The Athletic, saying that Josh Allen was playing a part in the head coaching and GM decisions. And this caused a bit of a debate because Adam Schefter basically sort of quoted the report from Diana Rossini saying, as so he should. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, former Bills, I'm not going to list every single team he played for, but multiple team quarterback, said, no, he shouldn't. And this is a really interesting debate because, again, I think it comes down to credibility and your standing. And should a quarterback, or indeed maybe a star defensive player, maybe if he's the face of your franchise, like Ray Lewis, say, or trying to think, Aaron Donald, maybe with the Rams, trying to think if there's any other big star defensive players around the NFL. Luke Kuechly when he was with the Panthers, maybe. I'm just thinking names off the top of my head here. But again, if someone is of that credibility and standing within an organization, and again, they are the face of the franchise, especially now in the quarterback day and age, I think they should. I think it should be a part of, right, are you two going to get along? Do you approve of this head coach? It doesn't necessarily have to be the be all and end all decision, but it should at least be part of the consideration. If there's five different people that need to vote on who is going to be the head coach, say, the owner, the GM, maybe the offensive defensive coordinators, like, are you going to work with him? Is it going to be a different system? Are you going to, do you think you could work with him, or do you think, you'd want to get a new job when you come? All these sort of things. Just getting as many people as you can. I think a star quarterback should be part of that decision. I think it's been talked about how LeBron James was effectively GM, assistant GM, or acting GM, or whatever word you want to use, when he was with, I think it was with the Lakers, and maybe with his other teams as well. Because again, LeBron James is so important that he should have a say in, the players that are coming in. Like, okay, this isn't the GM's decision to bring in player XYZ. LeBron James is the guy. Is this going to work with LeBron James? Should I run it past him? So I think something like this should absolutely be part of the conversation. And someone like Josh Allen, again, should be part of it. Again, not necessarily the final vote, but should have a say in the matter. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think players should get involved? Whether they be star players or not, do you think they should get involved in the decision making for GM and head coach? Let me know what you think in the comments or on our other social medias. Let us know what you think. While we're on the subject of head coaches, I'm just going to flick around with this. Wasn't necessarily the order that they were written down on my notes here, but this is what we're going to go to next. We're going to go around the head coaching carousel and just give my quick thoughts on what's happened recently since the last podcast we've done. The Pittsburgh Steelers have appointed Mike McCarthy, the former Packers and Cowboys head coach, to be their head coach. And if I'm being honest, I was slightly underwhelmed with the decision. I can understand to an extent the wanting to get someone in who is a proven head coach. I think the fact that he was from Pittsburgh or is from Pittsburgh played a part, and you can tell that in his introductory press conference today. You know that it meant a lot to him. He grew up supporting the Steelers, and he's from the area. It meant a lot to him. I think it played a part. I don't think it played the biggest part, and I can understand wanting to go with him because again, you get that stability, you get that credibility. You're not taking a huge risk, but at the same time, I wish the Steelers had taken a huge risk because at the moment we are looking with Mike McCarthy. If you look at his track record, as some people said, he's basically an older Mike Tomlin because their records are the same. They've both won one Super Bowl. They both sort of have this reputation, fair or not, of managing of being somewhere in the middle of that 9-8, 10-7 range. So I think they've gone for more of the same. I get the appeal of wanting to get an offensive mind, and he said in his press conference he's looking forward to working with Will Howard. Great, fine. But I just wish that had been a little bit more adventurous because I'm one of those people that is willing to take the risk that, okay, we may go three and do my maths here, 3-14 one year. We may go 2-15. We're willing to accept that. Because again, if you're in that middle bit, you're not high enough to be competing, but you're not low enough to be getting that number one draft pick. If you're in the middle, you're stuck. And I think with Mike McCarthy, that is someone who can keep us in the middle. And I don't really like that. So again, I wish we'd have taken that big risk. And no, if we went 2-15, we went 2-15. So be it. But I can see why they did it. I just don't agree. The Baltimore Ravens are appointing Jesse Minter as their new head coach. A solid hire, again, taking that bit of a risk, if you would, by going for a young defensive coordinator. You know, possibly, given the way the league goes these days, I think they probably would have maybe or should have gone for an offensive mind, especially with the situation surrounding Lamar Jackson. If you have a star quarterback and you want to build around him, so going for a defensive minded guy rather than an offensive minded guy. But if you look at his record with the Chargers, fine, you can say, okay, you can see why they did it. I just don't think it was the best choice for them. But I wish him well. I think it's a smart. He was one of the names being brought about by a lot of people, and that is a big step for him. It's one of the better jobs. Some people say it was the best job in this coaching carousel, and he's the one that got it. So good luck to him with that. And the Buffalo Bills appointing Joe Brady as their head coach. Again, another one that I can understand why, but I think I would rather have gone someone else. I saw Nick Wright making a point on this on social media that okay, you want to go offensive because that's the way the team is with a guy like Josh Allen, fine. But presumably Joe Brady would have played a long part in what the Buffalo Bills have done recently on the offensive side of the ball. So are you just taking the risk? Is there a chance you're just going to get more of the same with Josh Allen? Is this really a big leap? Now it could be that they're hoping that the system stays the same. Because it's a good system. No one's doubting that. It's got Josh Allen the MVP. Maybe they're hoping it's the same system, but maybe just a different voice. Maybe just wakes the team up a bit instead of Sean McDermott. Maybe that's their hope. I don't know. But I can see why they would have done it. And if I was Terry Pagula, if I was the Buffalo Bills owner, I probably would have found myself talking myself into making that decision as well, just for some level of continuity. So I think a smart choice, maybe not the best, but a smart one, certainly. Moving on, and we stay with an off the field topic before we move on to the roundup of the two conference championship games. And again, just a quick one. This idea, and I know it's been floated around, of having neutral site conference championship games, but as a result of the wind that we saw, or not the wind, the snow that we saw in Denver. I mean, it was wind and snow, but whatever. The weather that we saw in Denver over the weekend, and whether or not it makes for a good spectacle. Yes, it's great on TV, but we saw the product. Only 3 points in the whole of the second half. Not the great again, not great to watch. It was a bit of a slugfest. It needs to be said. Would it be better if you played a big game like that indoors? Mike Florio I saw floating around on PFT saying AFC Championship game gets put into an NFC dome stadium. So Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta. Trying to think of any other off the top of my head. Technically Los Angeles as well because that's both AFC and NFC. Um, Domed NFC stadiums. I'm sure I'm missing some, but those are the ones that are coming to mind right now. And then the NFC Championship game gets put in the AFC Dome Stadium. So Indianapolis. Who else is dome? Oh, Houston would be in there. Maybe you take the risk and just have it warm weather, quote unquote. So you put it in Miami. AFC Dome Stadium again, Los Angeles. Las Vegas would be another one. So, and you have it on a rotating basis. I don't agree with it. Mainly because I think you're then, what's the point of the number one seed? Yes, you get that bye, but then you only get the one playoff game at home. Surely your reward should be the two playoff games at home. The road runs through Denver, the road runs through Seattle, and all those phrases that we want to go to. Not only should you get that bye, but you should get every advantage, to you. And again, that's part of the home field advantage, is that if you are a cold weather team, say you are Buffalo, and you get the AFC Championship game, if you are lucky enough to get, in consecutive weeks, if you get the number one seed, not the Buccaneers, who else in Florida, the Dolphins and the Jaguars, two teams in warm weather, they've got to go to the cold. You should get that advantage. We've seen what cold does to some warm weather teams. Go for it. That should be your right, and that should be what you have earned. So I don't agree with this idea of putting championship games at neutral sites. Keep it as it is. Just keep it as it is. It's more toward the collegeification of the NFL. I just think it should not be a conversation. Shouldn't even start a conversation. And with that, we move on to our roundup section. Again, very quick because there's only two games to talk about, and we'll start with the first game first, obviously. The Patriots and the Broncos, and again, I'll touch on the losing team because there's more to talk about with the winning team. Broncos, obviously, the Bo Nix situation cost them a lot. I think Jared Stidham did well in the circumstances, probably enough that he may get some talk and some interest from other teams. Say, hey, maybe we can bring him in. Maybe he can be our starter, bridge quarterback, whatever. He did well in the circumstances, but obviously not perfect. Turnovers, what can you say? But again, no one was expecting him to be Bo Nix, and if he was Bo Nix, and if Bo Nix was playing, I think the Broncos win that game against that little extra difference, especially in a tight game like this, and the weather. I think probably tips the favour of the Broncos. I think they can just consider themselves unlucky. I don't think they really did anything wrong, with the exception of Sean Payton not taking the field goal earlier when when they should have. It's a point I've talked about. Yes, I get the analytics and I get that all sort of stuff, but especially in a game like that, so close, I was screaming about it in the later game. Take the damn points, especially in a playoff game. Take the damn points. I think that has cost a lot of teams in the past. Just take the points. Don't try and be brave. You'll end up looking stupid. Just take the points in the future. Since Sean Payton has already won a Super Bowl, and I get it, but it just frustrates me. The team seem to be foregoing what should be at least a great chance at 3 points, than for the chance of 7. It just is baffling to me. But that's my assessment of the Broncos. And the Rams and Seahawks, pretty much the same as the first game, but the other way around. This was a great defensive battle, then it was a great offensive battle. And again, I can't really fault the Rams for what they did for most of the game. This is just in the circumstances, playing on the road against a great team, someone's got to win. May as well be the Seahawks. But again, just towards the end, in the fourth quarter, with however many minutes it was left, the Rams' decision to go for a touchdown to take the lead rather than the field goal. Again, in that situation, take the field goal, because then when the game is on the line at the end, you're not playing for the touchdown. Then, if you get the ball back, you're going for a field goal. You don't have to go all the way down the field, and that probably costs, change their playmaking or play decision making a little bit. Just, could have picked up a couple of yards, and especially with the way the kickers are going these days, I'd try for a 60-yarder to win. in that situation rather than having to go all the way down the length of the field. So that's my only real concern takeaway from the Rams is, again, they're in a great spot. What they're going to do with Stafford, I think he's going to come back. But if not, what they're going to do with quarterback, I think they'll be just fine with Sean McVay as the head coach. And finally, just before we go, my funny story of the week. This one, I try to keep it away from the world of the NFL, but this one, it was just too good not to share. So, Jay Cuda, no idea, Cuda, basically on Twitter, has come up with a very interesting graphic. I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but interesting plot point, shall we say, for the Super Bowl. And he has pointed out, it's just funny. I know Twitter may be called like bad things at times, but this is what social media is great for. So Jay Cuda, whatever, has pointed out that in this century, every time the Super Bowl has been played in between two teams, one team that travels east to the game and one team that travels west, like longitudinally, latitudinally, this is important for later. The team traveling west has always won. So basically, he's predicting the Patriots are going to win because he said, I'll just go through this. Rams Patriots, when they played in New Orleans, the Patriots won. When the Raiders and Buccaneers played in San Diego, the Buccaneers won. When the Seahawks and Steelers played in Detroit, the Steelers won. So on and so forth. And as a result of this, because Seattle is just narrowly to the west of San Francisco, Santa Clara, whatever, where they're playing the game, so they've got to travel ever so slightly east, even though they're both on the west coast. He's got the pages. It's just funny, and he does a few other just funny observations around the Super Bowl, like he's pointed out that no starting QB with a last name less than 5 letters has ever won a Super Bowl. So what does that mean for Drake May? Contradicting what he said. It's just funny. He just comes up with a couple of very funny statistics, just quirks that we want to talk about. That they'll just make you chuckle a bit. So I urge you to go and follow him. Oh, and by the way, one last thing before we go: Shedeur Sanders making the Pro Bowl? No, just end it at this point. If this is what you're going to do to make the Pro Bowl, get rid of it. It's not serious anymore. I get that some of it is fan and coach voting, but no way should Shedeur Sanders be going to the Super Bowl ahead of now. And I get that Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, see, who Aaron Rodgers may have snubbed their invitation. I get it, but just don't invite someone. If Shedeur Sanders is who is going to the Pro Bowl after his season, no, just get rid of it. So, little rant to end, but that is the end of the show. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you're new and you liked what you heard, don't forget, like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the bell icon, do everything you need to do to keep this show up and running and keep the growth growing. I'm not sure if that's a phrase, but I'm going to stick with it. So keep it going. And don't forget to follow us on our other social medias. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and we are at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So give us a follow there. And as always, if you're returning, thank you so much for making this a part of your week. That is the end. I will speak to you next week. Hopefully when things are a little bit better. And I say this at the end of every show, but obviously with the weather situation that's going on around the US at the moment. If you are listening in the US, we've been hit pretty bad with it in Pittsburgh. 14 inches of snow, and it's not getting above freezing for the next 2 weeks. So that snow is sticking around. So weather's bad. I'm sure it's going to. I've seen some reports it's going to get even worse in the coming days. So I say it every week, but take care and please, especially this week, stay safe. I'll speak to you next week.